Amusement parks are supposed to be safe places. Nothing bad ever happens, the music never stops, every corner turned promises another adventure. But growing up and seeing something from your childhood in a new, very wrong light has a funny way of changing the places we remember. Sometimes you learn the history behind them, sometimes you stumble across abandoned photos online. Suddenly, nostalgia and terror meet. Somewhere that once felt magical starts feeling unsettling. Disney has built some of the most famous theme parks in the world, but not everything they've built has survived. Hidden behind the castles and fireworks are places that Disney would probably rather see people forget. An abandoned water park slowly reclaimed by nature, and an island that sat deserted in the middle of the Magic Kingdom's backyard for more than 20 years. And tonight, we're visiting both. Okay, hello out there. So a couple PSAs before tonight's video. Number one, if I go missing, I'm not saying it was Disney for legal reasons, but I'm also not saying that. Okay, time to get serious. Number two, our first story is going to cover some distressing topics surrounding child death. So if that is the kind of thing that greatly upsets you, please feel free to click out, or I'll put a timestamp here so you can skip ahead. Viewer discretion advised. Now, if you like strange, unbelievable stories, internet culture mysteries, or the weird corners of history, then subscribe, or don't. I'm not a beggar, but I will win you over eventually. Now strap in, get comfy, and let's visit some theme parks that are better left alone. When Disney opened River Country in 1976, it wasn't just another water park. It was the first water park that Disney ever built. Expectations were high. It was part of Magic Kingdom after all. But instead of bright colors and giant fiberglass slides like you'd expect to see today, River Country leaned into a more rustic, swimming hole sort of aesthetic. The whole place was designed to look like an old-fashioned lakeside campground, complete with boulders, rope swings, wooden docks, and winding pathways through the trees. And honestly, it looked incredible. It felt like discovering this secret oasis hidden in the Florida wilderness. Now, Disney wanted a way for lower-income families to still be able to enjoy the Disney experience, and they decided that River Country would be the answer. Which I understand and appreciate the idea here, but does it seem a little cruel and unusual to you to put their poor people park right there, essentially in Magic Kingdom where you can see the castle from the water slides? Or am I just being dramatic? It became a massive success, opening its doors to over 4,000 guests a day at its height. Which on paper sounds wonderful, but logistically, it was a lot. The park was only 6 acres, cramped between the Fort Wilderness campgrounds and Florida's Bay Lake, so it was often really overcrowded. But there was another problem. River Country's centerpiece was Bay Cove, a large swimming area with sandy beaches and water slides. Disney really wanted to push this whole natural swimming hole aesthetic, so they wanted the water to look like natural lake water. So what did they do? They used natural lake water, and that decision would lead to disaster. Bay Cove's water came directly from Bay Lake. Disney did filter the water, but long story short, it was not entirely separate from the lake. Guests were, in a sense, swimming in the same body of water that surrounded Magic Kingdom. For years, nobody thought much of it, until tragedy struck. August 1980, an 11-year-old boy was enjoying his day at River Country, splashing and swimming around without a care in the world. But the next day, he fell ill. Stomach aches, chills, fever. His family rushed him to the hospital where he underwent numerous tests, but doctors could not figure out what was wrong. So he was transferred to another hospital. They thought it was some sort of brain inflammation, but they couldn't be certain. So a spinal tap was performed, and these doctors were shocked at the results. The diagnosis was primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, a rare and devastating brain infection caused by an amoeba that lives in warm freshwater lakes. This disease, although rare, is almost always fatal, and sadly, it was in this case. As Florida officials tried to explain that this was just A natural risk and not the fault of River Country's filtration system, it didn't matter to parents. They were terrified of this place, and rightfully so. Disney needed to do some major PR. Now, eventually everything settled, but things can never go well for too long. Only 2 years later, in 1982, a church trip with 50 teens aboard stopped by River Country on their way back home. There were an estimated 500 kids in Bay Cove. It's believed that 14-year-old Howard didn't see a sign near the water slide that said, "Strong current, good swimmers only." There were 13 lifeguards on duty that night, 2 of which were assigned to that slide, one watching the top and one the bottom. Somehow, not one saw Howard stop moving after he came off the slide. It took 5 minutes for a lifeguard to respond, and by then, it was too late. Maybe the fact that it was nighttime had something to do with it, or the park being so overcrowded and chaotic, or maybe it was flat out neglect. Either way, it was the same story. Disney took no accountability and nothing changed. And in 1989, the last River Country tragedy occurred. On June 13th, a swimmer in Bay Cove suddenly felt something at their feet. The water was obviously too murky to see the bottom, but it felt soft, like skin. It felt like a body. The swimmer alerted the guards, and 13-year-old Christopher Staff was pulled onto the shore. People naturally started to gather around as the lifeguard was performing CPR. One of those was a woman named Kim Higginbotham. She was a 23-year-old scuba instructor, so of course she was CPR certified. And right away she noticed something. The lifeguard was performing CPR incorrectly. Kim tried to help, she tried to do anything, but she was not allowed. After 15 minutes of incorrect CPR, Christopher was taken to the hospital where he was pronounced deceased. No one knew for sure how long he was under or why lifeguards didn't respond. The murky lake water was really unsafe in this sense. You couldn't see anyone under the surface. And add probably really young, inexperienced lifeguards to that, and of course, Disney reps came out of the woodwork to, again, explain how this wasn't their fault and how their lifeguards were perfectly capable. And as frustrating as that is, I'm aware that in an impending lawsuit, you never admit fault because you will automatically lose that lawsuit and any related suits in the future. So from a business standpoint, I understand that this is just them trying to protect themselves, but saying that almost feels worse than saying nothing. And at that point, I think they deserve to... I'm not gonna finish that thought or this video will be taken down. Anyway, River Country's reputation was unsalvageable at this point. And new Disney water parks like Blizzard Beach and Typhoon Lagoon offered bigger attractions, cleaner designs, and fully controlled, chlorinated water systems. River Country suddenly looked old by comparison. But the final nails in the coffin came around the late 90s, early 2000s. Freshwater swimming areas came under increased health scrutiny, so regulations were much stricter. And then, of course, there was the post-9/11 tourism decline. In 2001, River Country closed its doors. Officially, it was temporary, just for winter maintenance, except it wasn't. For years, River Country just sat there. Slides faded under the Florida sun, empty pools filled with leaves, rope bridges sagged. The music, though, never turned off. But the strangest part, though, is where it sat, right inside Walt Disney World. Guests staying nearby could catch glimpses of abandoned slides hidden behind fences, like stumbling across a forgotten memory that no one wanted to acknowledge. In 2019, after years of rumors and urban exploration photos, Disney demolished what remained. Today, nearly nothing is left. But for a generation of visitors, River Country exists in that strange place between childhood memories and internet ghost stories. Okay, I'll admit that was a little more serious than I like to be on this channel. I like to keep everything lighthearted and fun, and when I had this idea, I didn't really know it would get that dark. So hopefully this next story will be a little bit of a palate cleanser. River Country feels eerie because it slowly disappeared. Discovery Island feels eerie because it never really left. Long before Disney built Animal Kingdom, there was a small island sitting in Bay Lake, just a hop and a skip from River Country. Originally called Treasure Island, Disney transformed it into Discovery Island in 1974 as a wildlife attraction, essentially Disney's answer to zoos. Visitors would board water taxis from Magic Kingdom and spend the day walking shaded trails filled with exotic birds, tortoises, flamingos, lemurs, and other animals from all around the world. It was peaceful. Unlike the busy park surrounding it, Discovery Island moved at its own pace. There were no roller coasters or fireworks, just 11 acres of winding paths disappearing beneath thick Florida vegetation. For years, it was this hidden gem for Disney fans looking for something a little bit different. But in 1998, a new villain emerges. Animal Kingdom opened. It had everything Discovery Island did, only on a much larger scale. It was essentially a bigger, better version of the same thing. Within months, Discovery Island was redundant. Now, nothing strange or tragic happened on the island while it was open, that we know of. The mystery begins after it shut down. Disney closed it permanently in 1999, and they just left. The buildings and docks remained, signs faded where they stood, nature slowly swallowed everything. And naturally, when this happens, that location attracts a very specific group of people, urban explorers. Over the years, photos began appearing online, showing abandoned aviaries overtaken by vines, moss-covered pathways, empty animal enclosures, and weathered structures disappearing into the forest. Some of these photos came from Shane Perez, a writer and photographer who wanted to see the island for himself. In 2004, he gathered a small group of friends and began the journey to the island. But there was a problem. There were ferry boats crossing the lake every few minutes, so if they wanted to get by undetected, they would have to swim. So they swam 300 feet in alligator-infested waters, by the way, but they reached the shore. And waiting for them there was a plethora of strange things that would spark a lot of conspiracies. I think Disney's listening. That was so freaky. Right when I got to the really weird part, my camera died and the electricity in my entire house went out. Oh, that was so freaky. Anyway, there were tons of animals just left on the island, and in one of the old office buildings, preserved snakes in jars, and one in a Coke bottle. People began to speculate that Disney was still using the island for some sort of biological experimentation. Now, to be clear, we do not know that to be a fact. Now, if you're wondering what became of Shane and all his buddies, Shane was actually really smart about this. The statute of limitations in Florida at the time was 4 years. Well, Shane waited 5 years to publish his blog post, as a tongue twister, his blog post and his photos. And his post went viral. It was even on the news. Disney was obviously not happy, but there wasn't much they could do. Shane got a lifetime ban from all the parks, but that was it. But after all of the increased exposure from Shane's story, other explorers started to feel like, well, if he can do it, I can do it too. Discovery Island was suddenly this mythic forbidden island that had become their ultimate mission. Some even called it the Area 51 of Disney. Storm Discovery Island, they can't stop all of us. And through the years, quite a few people did go and explore the island. Disney handed out lifetime bans left, right, and center. But one of, if not the last explorer, was Richard McGuire, aka the Southern Pirate. And his story would really hammer home the fact that you do not mess with the mouse. Richard had dreamed of going to Discovery Island since he was a child. Unfortunately, his family did not, so he didn't. So when he saw all of these people exploring the island that was now abandoned, he knew that this was his shot. and now he'd have the whole thing to himself. But security was really starting to ramp up on the island after the string of explorers, so it was now or never. Richard spent months carefully mapping out his plans, buying supplies. He planned on staying on the island for an entire week. And finally in 2020, the time came. And as he was standing there scoping out the island, somebody actually stole his kayak. So he drove up the road to a gas station where someone had an aluminum boat. He offered to buy it right there on the spot. The owner sold it to him, but pointed out that it had a few holes. So Richard bought some duct tape and patched it up. Duct tape fixes everything. Everybody learns that in the South. If it moves and it's not supposed to, duct tape. If it doesn't move and it is supposed to, WD-40. Digressing. The next night, Richard finally set sail for Discovery Island. And surprise, surprise, his boat started to sink. But he didn't come all this way to give up now. He barely made it to the island, but he made it there. But the island, unfortunately, was quite a bit different now. Hurricane Irma had destroyed nearly everything in 2017. There were trees on buildings, windows shattered, the Avian Way was completely destroyed. And there were cameras, trail cams with motion sensors, everywhere. Things were actually going smoothly for Richard until he stepped in front of one. Realizing what he had done, he ran back to his campsite in one of the old office buildings, but soon after, he started hearing voices. Police circled, announcing their presence with guns drawn, while a security boat circled the island in the water, and a helicopter overhead. Richard somehow managed to make it back to his boat containing all of his food and water, only to realize it had all been confiscated. But still, he was able to evade police for several hours, eating fruits from trees, drinking water from bottles washed ashore. I think I would rather just be thirsty, personally, and even burying himself in the sand and forest. Eventually, he used the empty water bottles as a flotation device. How, I cannot be certain, and he floated back to the mainland, but he was quickly detained. He received a $100 fine, a lifetime ban, but he got his boat back. All of that, drinking strange water, weapons out, burying yourself in the sand, all for a $100 fine, is crazy. But the intense security has spawned its own theory that maybe the government bought the island from Disney to use it for nefarious things. Again, we can't be certain. But if Disney are not using the island, then why go to all of this trouble? What secrets lie at Discovery Island, and why are there snakes in jars? The island is still there today, hidden in plain sight. And in an old maintenance hallway lies a whiteboard, decorated with the signatures of every explorer who's gone since it shut down. Boats no longer take guests across, and the area is closed from the public. But from certain areas around Bay Lake, you can still catch glimpses of it through the trees. It's a reminder that even Disney, the company built on preserving magic, can't preserve everything forever. Maybe that's why abandoned Disney attractions fascinate so many people, because they're places we were taught to see as timeless. Disney is built on preserving stories, memories, and childhood magic, so seeing its parks fall apart feels wrong. Like finding out a place from your dreams was left to crumble. Sometimes all it takes is one old photo, one forgotten story, or one abandoned island hidden behind the trees to remind us that even the happiest places on Earth have a past that they'd rather leave behind. Alright, and that is a wrap for tonight. This wind sounds like it is gnawing at the walls. Thank you for coming over, and as always, if you have any strange story ideas, please feel free to comment them or send them to this email and I will get to them. And with that, I will see you next time. Good night.